A deserted city, an inescapable jungle, a mysterious creature threatens the survival of humanity. In this world, how do people face the unknown fear? Can they find their way home? Or will they be forever lost in this cursed place? Subscribe and join us on this wild journey. Its colors were exotic and resembled the wings of a beetle, and a yellow library card with a text that puzzled us. The Library of Corona, it said the girl had written her name on the card as well. When I saw it, my world started spinning. Isabella Lelis, it said in the girl's childish handwriting. Isn't that your last name, sir? My colleague said it is. I didn't know what to say or think. Well, do you know her? I don't know. No, I've never seen her before in my entire life. It must be a coincidence. That's a pretty big coincidence. Sir, I didn't respond to that. There's something on the ground as well. One of the medics said on the blood-stained moss. Beneath the girl there was a notebook. It must have fallen out of her hand, the one that was hanging limply above the book. I picked it up and opened it. The pages were covered with small text written, with a different handwriting than the girl. Sir, one of the medics said we will have to bring some tools to cut her down. Yes, I said absently. There's one more thing. The medic said I put the book in a plastic evidence bag. What, there's too much blood? The medic pointed at the ground. What do you mean? There's too much blood. I asked beneath the boulder, sir. The medic explained it's impossible for all that blood to come from a child. A moment of silence, then I said, we will have to come back here with better tools. A day later we successfully removed the upper body of the girl, and brought it back to the morgue where it was examined. We also tried to lift a boulder with the help of a crane, but it wouldn't budge. Instead we dug a hole under it, but we didn't find any new body parts. All we could do this day was to sample as much of the blood as possible during the examination of the body. I read the notebook. It contained the story of the city of Corona. I was convinced it was fiction, the deranged story written by the man I thought must have killed the girl, until a few weeks ago, when the forensic lab called me. I still have a hard time believing it, but they told me there's no other way. They had tested the DNA of the girl, and compared it to mine, because of her last name. It was my idea, since I didn't want anyone to suspect anything. We didn't think it would reveal anything, but it did. The 10 or so years old girl, Isabella, was my daughter. I was sure it wasn't possible. 10 years earlier, I lived with my ex-wife, and I never cheated on her, and certainly didn't have any children with her. We stayed together for 5 more years, so I would have known if she had a baby during that time, and yet there was nothing wrong with the test. Lo is a transcript of the notebook. I've typed it out here in the hopes that someone will remember the city of Corona, or someone who might have lived in it. Please contact me if you have any information. This is what was inside the notebook. My name is Helena Fredrickson. 5 years ago. I was a different person. I was younger back then, not just in the ordinary sense, but in spirit too. There was joy in my life and I had hopes and dreams. That's all gone now. I don't have that much time to write this down, but I will try and explain what happened to us, to our entire community, as well as I can. The event, as we have come to call it, occurred on July 9, 2013. I was only visiting Corona over the day to take my niece, Isabella, to the grand opening of the Red Grove, the city's new amusement park. It was supposed to be the biggest one in Sweden, and Isabella had begged her parents to go to the grand opening, but neither of them had been able to work, so they called me and asked me to do it for them. I was their go-to person for when they needed help, with Isabella the only one they trusted. How I wish that hadn't been the case. Now, considering what happened. We arrived pretty early, a few hours before the opening, so that we wouldn't need to stay in line the whole day to get inside. The weather was amazing. It had rained earlier in the morning, so we had been a bit worried, but when we got to the city there wasn't a cloud in sight. Isabella couldn't stop talking about how much fun we would have, and it warmed my heart to see her so happy. It took us a bit longer than expected to get to the amusement park, since one of the main streets had been closed off for a military parade. This didn't bother us that much. It rather increased the feeling of celebration in the air. To avoid the parade, we had to take a bus to the city center, the Freya Square, and from there we had to take the subway to the yellow neutral business cluster, the tallest skyscrapers in Sweden. It was possible for us to walk to the Red Grove. From there were people everywhere. It turned out that a lot of them had taken a ferry down the river. That I didn't know about. This meant we had to stand in line. After all, Isabella didn't mind, but I knew she would get hungry soon and I worried that it would ruin her mood. Luckily, there was a man selling hot dogs from a cart that he was pushing down the line. I bought a hot dog and a soda for Isabella. Her parents didn't really like when I bought her junk food, but a day like this I thought they would understand. The man was also selling red balloons to the children. Isabella said she wanted one. I tried to tell her that she would have to carry it around all day and that there would be more balloons inside the amusement park, but she wouldn't listen. Reluctantly, I bought her a balloon as well. At this point, no one knew that their entire lives were about to change. In a matter of minutes, Isabella accidentally let go of the balloon. I feared it would make her sad, but it didn't seem to bother her that much. We looked at the balloon as it rose up into the air and drifted away. Soon it was but a red dot against the vast blue sky. Then suddenly it vanished. Where did it go? Isabella said I couldn't explain it. It had just disappeared. I don't know. I said maybe it popped, but something, an uneasy feeling I couldn't rationalize, made me doubt that. Then, only a few minutes later, strong winds came from every direction. It carried a smell with it that reminded me of something rotten. You, Isabella said, as her long white hair was blowing in the wind. What's that smell? I held her hand harder. I don't know. I said. People looked around confused and their joyful voices became concerned. Something was happening, but no one knew what it was. Sirens echoed in the distance, seemingly coming from the business cluster. Oh my God! A woman said and pointed towards the skyscrapers. The top of the building is gone. It wasn't that easy to see, but she was right. The top of the tallest building was gone, as if it had been cut off with a knife. Isabella was too short to see it, but she picked up that something wasn't right on everyone's faces, and she became worried herself. I think we need to get away from here, I said, acting completely on instinct. I don't think it's safe. Isabella teared up, but the opening aren't. We will come back later, sweetheart, I said as I walked away from the crowd with her. One of the ferries were just about to leave. We quickly stepped aboard. A few others joined us, but most of the people stayed behind in the hopes that everything would be sorted out. Isabella cried, but she wasn't mad. As the ferry slowly drove away from the riverside Roman hut, a commotion of some kind erupted among the crowd back on land. I couldn't see what was going on, but suddenly everyone screamed in terror and tried to run towards the water. They were clearly escaping from something, but I couldn't see what it was. All I saw was people stepping on each other while they tried to jump into the river and swim away. It was a horrible sight, and I'm glad Isabella wasn't tall enough to see over the railing. Next, the sirens from the emergency L system began blasting its eerie sound of imminent catastrophe. Everyone asked questions. No one had any answers to. Most people I heard thought we were under attack either by terrorists or the Russians. I picked up my phone to call my sister, but there was no signal. I tried with Isabella's phone as well, without any luck. I soon discovered that no one had any signal. At the sides of the river that passed through the city, people were looking out of their windows, trying to get a glimpse of what was going on, but the only thing they could see that was out of the ordinary was the cut-off building in the yellow neutral business cluster. Look, Isabella said and pointed at the sky. I've never seen such a big bird before, and the enormous bird-like creature soared high above us. It was pitch black, although it was impossible to say for sure. It seemed to be just as confused about seeing us as we were seeing it circled. The city sent her a few times and then flew away again. The sight of the giant bird, or whatever it truly was, turned our anxious confusion into terror. We still didn't know what had happened, but now we knew it didn't have anything to do with terrorists or some foreign power. This was something else, something impossible to believe and yet at the same time impossible to deny. The ferry let us off a bit further down the river close to Freya Square. People seemed to be in a state of panic, although no one knew what was wrong. Some were packing their cars to escape the city. Others were running somewhere, perhaps to their loved ones, but most people clustered around police officers, city workers or military personnel from the parade to try and get some information. But they only got the same answer over and over again, yelled at them so that it could be heard over the sirens from the emergency alert system that nothing was known and that they needed to return to their homes and listen to the radio for more information. How are we supposed to listen to the radio when the power is out? The voice came from an old woman. Look around, there's no power. She was right. Go home and close your windows and wait for the power to come back. The policeman said, we don't know what is going on, but the safest thing to do is to follow the procedure. He was interrupted by something happening a few meters away. The first person, who had tried to leave the city, a man on a loud motorcycle, had come back. I was carrying Isabella, comforting her. At the same time as I tried to hear what the man on the bike was trying to tell everyone. I pushed through to get closer to him. He walked to the center of the square and climbed up on the foot of the statue of Freya. Few people believed him, but everyone that had seen the creature in the sky had no doubt he was telling the truth. However impossible it seemed. There's no way out. The man yelled, the main road cuts off at the edge of the city and there's only jungle. I can't explain it. I'm sorry, but it's true. We are surrounded by a dense, thick jungle and there's no way around it. Then it's true. A policeman whispered to himself next to me, for the love of God. It was all true. I asked him what he meant first. He didn't want to acknowledge my question, but when he saw my confusion and tears in my niece's innocent eyes, he turned to me and said quietly, before we lost contact with the helicopter that was surveilling the parade, the pilot said something that simply didn't make sense. He was crashing, something had cut off his rotor blades, and he said that it all had changed. Somehow. The view had changed. Before he hit the ground, he yelled that he had seen a jungle to the west and an ocean to the east. More and more reports came in, and even though it was impossible to tell rumors from facts, they were all telling the same story. The entire world around the city had been replaced. In an instant, the city was the same, but the sky above it wasn't. Eventually the screaming sirens went silent, the cars stopped beeping their horns and the copan of voices died out. An uncanny silence fell over the city. The feeling was beyond unreal. I didn't know what any of this meant. I tried to explain it to my niece, but she was only 5 years old and she couldn't understand. She wanted to go home to her parents and I didn't know what to tell her. She was tired and needed a rest, so I went to a hostel nearby and paid for a room. Soon the economy of the city would collapse. But for the first few days in this new, unknown world, people still accepted money as payment. What followed was 5 years of unending trials and hardships, continuous battle for survival with no hope for our help or rescue. It started during the first night. The sun, identical to our own, yet new and strange, set due north instead of west, and was replaced by unrecognizable stars covering the entire sky. As I looked up at them from the small window in our room, I didn't feel awe, but rather I felt completely lost. The strangest feeling during all these years must have been the paradoxical sensation of familiarity on the streets, mixed with the awareness of total displacement. I think this was partly why people kept close to the city center drowned themselves in the illusion of being home, even though they knew deep down that they couldn't escape their fate as stranded in the unknown. Then, as I leaned out the window, I heard the sounds: people screaming, gunshots, cars driving madly through the streets without anywhere to go, and the occasional odd howling that made my blood run cold. I never saw anything of what happened that night, but it changed the population, more than 2 million people, forever. I closed the window and hid behind the bed with Isabella. She wanted to cry for her mother, but I kept my hand over a trembling mouth. The next night was calmer, probably because no one dared venture outside during the days. I soon realized the threat didn't come from the unknown jungle outside of the city, but from the people within. It was impossible to tell how much crimes were committed, but given what I saw with my own eyes: looting, robberies, and even murders, I figured the rate of crime must have gone up by a lot. However, it wasn't total anarchy. The police and a few military units that had been in town for the parade kept some vital order to the community, since ordinary people didn't have guns. The police and the military wasn't threatened by the average citizen. The leader stepped forward, the man on the motorcycle, and after a few weeks everyone seemed to cooperate peacefully. The food that was left in the stores were mostly distributed fairly, and everyone that could work seemed to do it without hesitation. Even I, the scientist that had been working at the university at the time of the event, couldn't figure out what had happened, but with the help of hundreds of citizens, they managed to build a small nuclear power blonde that could return electricity to the city. I mostly helped out with that project. I didn't know anything about nuclear physics, but I did what little I could. It was amazing what we were capable of as a people, and in all my dreadfulness, a feeling of pride grew in my chest, although our time in this world wasn't simple. Far from it. Aside from my personal problem with keeping Isabella healthy and safe, which I succeeded with, although she never felt safe, there were 3 major problems that kept growing larger for every week. The first one was the food and water situation. Some people had managed to grow wheat and potatoes in parks and on soccer fields, but it wasn't enough. We were running out of food and water. It did rain from time to time, but very few people felt safe drinking the rainwater. To battle this problem and find solutions to some other problems as well, expeditions were sent out to explore the jungle. These typically ended the same way, that is, with no one coming back. Only once or twice did someone manage to return to the city, but they weren't themselves anymore. It was as if something in the jungle had captured their souls and let their bodies walk back unscratched. The second problem was nature seemed to have spared us the first couple of months, but soon after we got the electricity back, it turned on us. It took a while before I saw it with my own eyes, but seemingly at random, mysterious creature entered the city. Sometimes they just walked right through it, never to return again. A policewoman, one of the new recruits, told me that she had followed a naked blue child as it solemnly walked into the city and then back out of it again. At other times, indescribable monsters wreak havoc on the streets, killing as many people as they could before returning to wherever they came from. At one point, and this I actually saw for myself, an enormous centipede, pure white, with hundreds of red eyes, suddenly appeared from a manhole. It quickly climbed up against the building, as if it knew exactly what it was doing, and entered one of the windows on the top floor. Next came the screams from the people inside the building. A few escaped, but everyone else inside were ripped to shreds. Only after about 5 minutes did the centipede exit the building from the entrance. Its white segmented body stained with blood and returned down the manhole. These attacks, as they were called, aroused fear and panic in all of us, although it didn't happen that often. It happened often enough for everyone to be on edge all the time. The third problem also didn't become noticeable until later. There was a problem of health. There was no pattern to who was affected or not, but some people, probably no more than one, got sick. It started out like a fever, and slowly progressed with nightmarish mutations randomly hitting the body. Most of these mutations made the victims handicapped and disfigured, but sometimes very rarely the victims developed properties that were seemingly beneficial to them. The most extreme case of this that I saw was a young girl who grew a third eye in the middle of her forehead. The iris of the new eye glittered with amazing colors, and the girl claimed that she could use the eye to see other people's emotions. At the beginning of the health crisis, the sick people were treated badly, just as if they had been monsters from the jungle. This treatment only got worse when it was revealed that the creatures from outside never attacked the sick. At one point, a mob gathered at Free Square set on chasing the sick people out of the city. Luckily, this was stopped by the military. In the end, however, the sick people were sent into the jungle. Not to be away with them, though, but to make use of their immunity to the nature of this world. This turned into a huge success that eventually solved the food and water problem. They could venture out and explore the surrounding area and return with edible fruits, vegetables and small mammal-like animals that they hunted. This was a turning point for us, and then luck struck again. All attempts at fishing had failed so far, but all of a sudden there were fish everywhere in the river. We soon learned that there were different periods for when the fish was out to sea or close to land. However, as soon as they came close to land, mysterious purple thunderstorms that lasted weeks tormented the city, and yet we survived. Many people didn't, of course, but life was possible in the end. We prevailed during the 5 years that followed. There weren't that many catastrophes, and our focus on survival kept most of our thoughts of home away. Even Isabella thought less and less of her parents. As she grew older over time, most people got used to the bizarre situation they had found themselves in back in July 2013. Many people did commit suicide, yes, but most people choose to live on in this unknown land. 2 events, however, changed things. First, it was what happened to a planned expedition at sea. Hundreds of people, mostly men, decided to venture out into the ocean with one of the luxury cruisers that had been moored next to the city. This was going to be a great adventure, and perhaps a way to find some answers to where we had ended up. It inspired all of us. Thousands of people, Isabella and I included, had gathered to watch as the huge boat slowly sailed out. It all felt similar to that day 5 years earlier, when we had waited for the amusement park to open. We all stared at the horizon as the boat named Berto de Esparo turned into a small dot against the setting sun. We imagined the amazing adventures they would be on and looked forward to their return. But then something that must have been larger than anything we had seen so far came out of the water and swallowed Biro the Espiro Hall. Some people screamed and others cried. This was a hard blow to the city. Just knowing that a being like that being able to eat an entire luxury cruiser in one bite could exist deprived many people their hopes of a future. The next event was different, was a miracle to say the least. It happened only a month after the destruction of Bio de Espero, a military guard. A young man, who had only been 15 at the time of our disappearance from Earth, discovered that when he stood at a certain place at Freya Square, he could tune into a specific radio station from our old world. The station's name was Synthwave Mix and dedicated most of its broadcasting to that kind of music. Hope returned immediately, but this time the hope was different from the one we had spent 5 years building up within ourselves. This was the hope of seeing our loved ones again, the hope to return home. The people at the university investigated the area to try and determine where the radio signals were coming from. They didn't have much success, but soon realized that they emanated from the ground beneath Ria Square. While the area was investigated by the scientists, ordinary people showed up en masse. They all had radios of different kinds with them, like children carrying stuffed animals to feel safe, hoping to tune into Synthwave Mix and get a taste of their lost home. Of course, the area where the radio station could be heard was too small, and the police had to chase everyone away to give the scientists the room they needed. A few days later, though, the scientists placed a set of large speakers at the foot of the statue of Freya and connected them to the receiver they were using to listen in on the radio station. Day and night. The relaxed, somewhat melancholic synthetic music played non-stop to the entire city. People congregated around the statue. They even defied the dangers of the night. This became our city's new tradition. Ending the day by going to the statue and sitting down around it as if in prayer became our pilgrimage. It wasn't exactly the music that drew people to the square, but rather its origin. Still, the electronic melodies soon turned into a symbol of all of our hopes and desires. From time to time, people got up and danced, sometimes while crying from a bittersweet joy. Difficult to explain, although the thing that made us all go silent and become totally focused was when the hosts said something. Usually they only spoke about the music they were broadcasting, completely unaware that an entire city full of people were listening to them almost religiously, but on rare occasions they talked about the world outside. At those times it felt like our hearts collectively stopped. In anticipation, would they say something about us? About their efforts to figure out where we all had gone and how they would bring us back. But there was never any news about us, just as if they had already forgotten about us or never known about us at all. The tragic fate of the city of Corona never came up, yet we never lost faith. It took a long time and now I'm getting closer to the present day, but eventually the scientists decided that it would be worthwhile digging a large hole right where the radio waves seemed to sip out of the ground. This was no easy task and neither was it safe. The work took weeks. Again, we all helped. No one really knew what exactly we were looking for. We only knew that it was something. When we reached the bottom, where the rock was too hard to dig through, a mountain of dirt covered the entire square. Our efforts hadn't been in vain. We discovered right beneath the place where the radio waves had been picked up, there was a small hole in the bedrock. People were asked to back away from it, while the scientists investigated it. First they tried to measure how deep it was. This took some time, since it was hard to find a long enough rope. In the end, it was estimated to be about 700 m deep. Next, some equipment was sent down tight to the end of the rope, and to everyone's surprise, everything that was sent down was swallowed by the hole. Of course no one knew where it went, but we all thought the same thing, that somehow it had returned home. It was a reasonable assumption, given that the only thing coming out of the hole, the radio waves, came from Earth. We all rejoiced in this discovery. More experiments were done and, although some questions remained unanswered, the consensus even among the scientists was that the hole really was a portal back to our own world. There were two large problems that needed to be solved, though. The first was the safety. Every time something tied to the rope disappeared at the bottom of the hole, the rope was cut off, just like the skyscraper 5 years earlier. This meant that it was possible that whoever entered the hole would be cut off as well. However, this problem was solved pretty soon by tying a camera to the rope, connected to a screen above ground. It was discovered that the rope was only cut off when pulled back. As long as it wasn't pulled back, the screen still received signals from the camera. The camera never recorded anything other than darkness on what was assumed to be the other side, but since it continued to work until the rope was pulled back, this didn't seem to be such a big problem. After all, some technical issues were expected under the circumstances. The second problem was that the hole was too small for anyone to fit into. Many attempts were made to wind the hole, but the bedrock seemed to be made out of a stronger material than any of our machines could tear into. This was extremely frustrating. It made us feel like we had reached the finish line, only to discover that we were unable to cross it. In the end, one of the scientists said she wanted to send her 10-year-old son down the hole. He was small enough to fit into it. This was widely debated for quite some time before it was approved. The mother argued that the city of Corona was no place for her son and that all the evidence suggested the hole was the only way home. The boy was brave. He knew he would probably never see his poor mother again, but still went through with it. He was given a walkie-talkie and after a tear-filled goodbye to his mother, he was sent down the 700 m deep black hole. He was instructed to radio in after he reached the other side, confirming he was safe after the rope was pulled back. The mother waited and waited for her son to report. However, he never did for weeks. The mother sat at the edge of the hole under merciless heat and under pouring rain, calling her son over and over again with her walkie-talkie. No one knew what, if anything, had gone wrong. Since no other radio waves had been picked up other than synthwave mix, it was possible that other radio waves simply couldn't enter into our world. For some reason still, the authority deemed the hole too unsafe for anyone else to enter. This didn't change people's minds, though. The hole represented the only true hope we had felt in years, and given all the horrible things in our world that could destroy us at any moment as easily as it is for us to blow out a candle, the small risk of going through the hole seemed to be more than acceptable. The hole was guarded by the police, but most of the police shared the city's collective opinion that the hole was the only way out, not for any of the adults, but for our children. And now I'm sitting here in the room I paid for 5 years ago writing this down. During the last few weeks, many parents have been sending their children down the hole at night. This world is truly no place for them. Although they could survive, they deserve better. Hence, like many others, I've decided to send Isabella home. When I told her about it, she looked at me with a happiness in her eyes I hadn't seen since we were transported to this dreadful, God-forsaken world. I've been writing this all day. Now it's my testimony to what happened to Corona. I will give this notebook to Isabella. I'm sure she will be able to give it to her father. Somehow I know it in my heart that she will find her way home to her parents. Soon it will be dark and I will bring Isabella to Freya Square one last time. I'm sorry it took so long. Hi, everyone, my name is Ava Wayne and today I am 8 years old. I was 8 yesterday for the first time, but now I am even older. I got to use my mom's computer today, but don't tell her. Last night when my dad came home from work, he brought me a big chocolate cake with vanilla frosting that had my name on it, and I got to blow out the candles. I didn't even have to eat dinner first. It was the best day, even though I didn't have a party. It doesn't matter, though, because I've never had a party before. My mom and dad say that I'm not allowed, 'cause we can't have any other people in the house. They lie and tell me that it's because we live too far away, but I know that it is because of my friend Evie, who lives with us. Evie looks exactly like me and we are like sisters. She is not really my sister, though we just say that Evie can do this really cool trick, where she can move my arms and say things in my voice. Sometimes it is a little bit annoying, but she's my friend, so it's okay. My mom and dad don't like Evie, though, and this makes her very mad. My mom says that Eve needs help and we have to see someone for her. I don't know what she means, but Evie says that my mom is a liar and I don't like telling Evie that she is wrong. My dad gets really mad and yells at Evie to stop and to shut up and leave me alone, but that just makes her more mad. I've tried to tell him to stop, but he doesn't listen. Yesterday when my dad brought home the cake, he asked me if I liked it and I told him yes, and that Evie liked it too. He got really mad, but my mom told him that it was not the time and he didn't say anything about her. When they lit the candles and told me to make a wish, I didn't know what to wish for. I kind of wanted some new paints so that I could make more paintings for my room, but I also wanted a puppy or some new toys. Mostly, I wanted to wish for Evie to stay, but Evie thought that was a stupid wish, because she says she's always going to be with me forever, so I didn't wish for that. I asked Evie what else I should wish for, and my dad got really mad and told me to just make a wish already, because this was none of Eve's business. That made me a little bit sad, because it was Eve's business and she was with us, and that was rude of him to yell at her like that. My mom said it was okay, but Dad said that it was not normal. Evie was also getting mad, because Dad said she wasn't normal. Everyone was just mad and I almost cried. But then Evie told me to just make my wish because she would make any of my wishes come true. I thought about it really hard, but then Mom told me to hurry up, or else the cake was going to get ruined. So I finally decided to wish for my parents to leave Evie alone and be nice to her. Then I blew out the candles and my mom clapped, but I could tell that my dad was still mad. We ate cake anyway, but I didn't ask if he could have some, because it was finally a good time. We finished the entire cake all by ourselves, and I was even allowed to have 2 whole pieces. It was awesome. Last night I had a really scary nightmare that I stabbed my mom and my dad in their bed when they were asleep. It was really scary and I woke up and cried, but I don't think they heard me, because no one came to check on me. Only Evie was there and she said it was okay when it was morning. I got up, but my mom didn't make any breakfast and she didn't answer when I was yelling for her. Evie says that they are still asleep and that I shouldn't go up to their room, so I didn't. Evie helped me to make breakfast. She showed me how to make a burrito with eggs and some chicken that she bought. It was really messy because Evie said that it was fresh meat that had just been killed. I already know that they kill animals for food, because my grandpa has a farm and I had seen them make a turkey before, so I knew that it was very messy. After I ate, Evie said that we could watch TV. She said that I didn't even have to clean up, because Mom and Dad weren't going to even see it. She told me that she made my wish come true, and that they weren't going to be mad at us anymore, and they weren't going to yell at us either. Evie says that now we can do whatever we want. I had ice cream and I watched cartoons all morning instead of going to school, and when the phone rang and the school called, Evie talked to them, and she sounded just like my mom. She told them that I was sick and the lady believed her. It was so fun and I didn't even know that she could do that. Evie let me use my mom's laptop because she says she knows the password. She told me I could write on here like a diary, and post it so other people could read it. Isn't that so cool? I wonder who is reading this. Ha ha. Evie just made me lunch, and it was a sandwich with me again. Evie just made. I don't eat this much meat because my mom likes for me to eat my veggies, but Evie says that Mom is not the boss anymore, so I can eat whatever I want. I had a lot of chips and my tummy started to hurt, and I really wanted my mom, but Evie said that it was okay, and she could make it feel better. Evie told me to take a nap, and so I did, but I had another scary dream, that I was cutting up Mom and Dad because Evie was making me. When I woke up, Evie said it was just a dream, because Mom and Dad were still asleep upstairs. I want to go and see them, but Evie says I can't, or else it will ruin the wish, and we will get in big trouble for making a mess and eating junk. I think I'm going to go play hide and seek with Evie now. This is not my story. It is my daughter's. Her name was Thea. She died 2 weeks ago, a suicide by overdose. She called me just prior to the ACT, informing me of her intentions and the reasons behind them. I of course led with her, begging her through tears not to go through with what she had planned, but she was resolute in her decision, and with growing horror I realized that this was no bluff, no desperate cry for attention or reassurance. As she hung up the phone, I knew with certainty she was already as good as dead. I knew it from the moment she had said, "Daddy Ray is here." I immediately founded the police, knowing that they would be able to reach her well before I could, but I also knew they would be too late. They found her in bed by all appearances in a deep and peaceful sleep. One hand draped across her stomach, the other outstretched to the side, palm up, fingers curled as if clutching something. Another hand perhaps, but the other side of the bed, Ray's side, was empty. This is also Ray's story. He died a little more than a year before Teresa did. He was shot twice, once through his right hand, which he had held out defensively. The bullet piercing both his cell phone and his palm before lodging in the tile of the wall of the bathroom, in which he had made a final desperate attempt to hide. The second bullet found his neck and he bled out quickly alone on the cold floor. He was one of 9 people who died in his office building that day. 8 of those people thought it was just another Monday at work, unaware that they would not be walking out alive. At the end of the day, the NTH to die. The shooter had no intention of walking out again. Ray had called Teresa on his lunch break. That day she was at home, and the sight of his name lighting up her cell and causing it to buzz had made her smile. Married only 3 months, the pair was still in that young fleeting honeymoon stage of marriage, and RY would frequently find any excuse to phone his bride from work if time allowed. Hello. She answered, a smile in her voice. Why did the man always get hit by a bike on his way to work? Ray said, I don't know. Teresa responded. Why did he? Because he was stuck in a vicious cycle. Ray said. Teresa chuckled. The joke wasn't really all that funny, but RY had always delighted in corny humor, and his joy in telling these awful jokes brought Teresa more pleasure than the punchline itself. Case in point, he had used a ridiculous pickup line to win her over in the first place. Feel my shirt, he had said to her. A stranger in a sea of people crammed into a mixer at one of her girlfriend's apartments 2 years ago. Do you know what it's made of? Boyfriend material. Thea had laughed out loud. 1, because the pickup line was genuinely funny, and 2, because RY, tall and attractive in a goofy kind of way, was so ridiculously happy to use it on her. His smile contagious and immediately endearing, and as bad as the line had been, it had worked. They had been together ever since. How is your day? Teresa said, sitting down at the kitchen table living the dream. Ray responded with some sarcasm. Actually, my presentation went well this morning. I'm supposed to present it again to senior staff on Wednesday. Things are looking promising. That's great news. Teresa said. It really is. Ray said, satisfaction in his voice. You know, if this proposal goes through, we should celebrate. Go away somewhere. There was a pause on Ray's end. That sounds like a wonderful idea. He responded, only now he sounded slightly distracted. Do you have some place in mind? I don't know. Teresa said, thinking Cheryl has that CIN that she said we are always welcome to use. We ought to take her up on that sometime. She and Brad will end up selling it before we ever use. It would be nice to get away. Ray didn't respond. Babe, Teresa said, a moment's hesitation. Did you hear that? Ray asked. Hear what? Teresa said, but before he could respond. She heard it, a loud report, a distant bang coming over the phone. Ray, what was that? I don't know. He said, and from the sound of his voice he was walking. His voice sounded shaky. Ray? There was a second loud report, still distant but closer, and Teresa felt her hands go cold when she thought she heard a woman scream. I'm going to find out what's going on. Ray said, I'll call you back, Ray. Teresa said, but he was gone. She set the cell phone down on the table and stared at its black screen. She got up suddenly from the kitchen table, walked to the sink and filled the glass with water, which she done, and staring over at the phone, she willed it to ring again to show Ray's name. It did not. Teresa rushed over and picked it up. She called Ray's cell phone. It went to voicemail. She called his desk phone. It too went to voicemail. She called reception at his office. No answer. She slammed the phone back down on the table, hands trembling. She found it hard to catch her breath, to not imagine the worst. To convince herself that what she had heard did not mean what she thought it meant. An interminable moment later her phone rang. She snatched it up. Ray? She said, baby. He said, whispering, his tone urgent. There's a man with a gun. Teresa sank into the chair. Where are you? She asked, whispering too without realizing she was. I'm in a bathroom down the hall from my office. He killed Mark. I saw it happen. His voice was trembling on the verge of tears or panic. Ray, hang up and call the police. She said. I did. He insisted. They are on their way. Okay, she said, just be calm. She said this as much to herself as she said it to RY. Where is he? She asked. I don't know. He said I saw him at the end of the hallway. I saw him shoot Mark. I came in here because it was the closest door. I don't know if he saw me. Did you lock the door? She asked. The door doesn't lock, he said, a small sob hitching in his voice. I'm in one of the stalls, it's locked. Teresa began to cry silently. The hopelessness of our situation sinking in. Who is he? She asked. I don't know. He's wearing a mask, ski mask. I think he's up to talking suddenly at the sound of a loud bang, disturbingly close. Ray hesitated and took a long shaking breath. I love you, Reese. He whispered, his voice even quieter, now barely audible. No, she objected, and she slid from the chair to the kitchen floor. The phone pressed tight to her ear. There was another banging sound, but this time it wasn't the report from a gun. It was the sound of a door being kicked open and hitting a wall. Ray took a sudden gasping breath. Ray? Teresa whispered. Bang, the sound of the door of a bathroom stall being kicked. No, Ray cried out, and the sound of his desperation made Teresa's entire body go numb. Ray, Teresa said louder. Bang, the sound of the stall door crashing open. No, Ray screamed. Thea yelled. Bang, the sound of a gun, and then everything was silent in the house for several seconds, as Tisa struggled to take in a breath. Finally she screamed. The shooter was a man named Vincent Holland. He had worked in the engineering department, just one floor down from Ray's office, in marketing a textbook. Disgruntled employee with manic depressive issues. At least that was the story that the press was reporting. Vincent had managed to kill 8 of his co-workers, and then had turned the gun on himself at the first sound of approaching sirens. The following 24 hours were a blur for Teresa. Through a haze of shock, she had answered police questions, had identified her husband's body, his face pale, but still unmistakably his own, and had made necessary phone calls to friends and family. And in the moments between, Thea had wept, her body crushed under the weight of a grief that was nearly unbearable. The physical pain of it enough to make her welcome the thought that perhaps it might kill her. What a mercy that would be. She thought the night of Ray's death, she had slept the deep and artificial sleep of the drugged, her body succumbing to whatever cocktail her best friend Gerald had insisted on giving her. ARA had not asked, did not even care what the pills were, but had taken them all and quickly slipped into the warm embrace of sleep. But her grief, at least briefly, could not reach her. When she woke the next day, she wondered briefly why her chest hurt so badly. It took but a moment for her to remember, and the tears were immediate. She rolled over and put her palm on Ra's side of the bed, where the mattress was cold and empty. Behind the sound of her crying, she could hear voices down the hallway. Cheryl and Teresa's mother were speaking in somber tones. Teresa looked at the clock. It was shortly after noon. Cheryl's sleeping pills had caused her to sleep for more than 11 hours. Teresa sat up in bed and wiped the tears from her cheeks, consciously pressing the sorrow down deep into her stomach. She picked up her cell phone from the nightstand more out of habit than necessity, and shuffled toward the bathroom, flipping a switch. The light assaulted her eyes, and for a moment she absorbed her own pitiful reflection. Eyes, swollen cheeks, splotchy nose, red. She took in a long, shaking breath. Then her phone buzzed in her hand, and she jumped the screen, said Ray. Thea stared at it. A mixture of disbelief and confusion coursing through her brain. She answered it. Hello. Her voice was barely a croak. Why did the man always get hit by a bike on his way to work? Ray said. Teresa struggled to take a breath, and when she was finally able, it came in a rattling gasp. She took an involuntary step away from the mirror, as if retreating from what she was hearing. Her mind raced, as she felt a sudden surge of hope, wearing against her lingering sorrow, and she wondered if perhaps the events of yesterday had been nothing but an incredible dream, because he was stuck in a vicious cycle. Ray concluded. Ray? Teresa said. Yeah, baby, he responded, "What's wrong?" "The joke wasn't that bad, Ray, where are you?" she asked. "I'm at work," he said with a slight chuckle, "just got out of a meeting. My presentation went well. I'm supposed to present it again to senior staff on Wednesday. Things are looking promising." Teresa didn't respond. "Reese, are you okay?" he asked. Teresa looked at herself in the mirror, at her Halloween mask of grief. The floor felt like it was tilting under her, and her brain still kicking off. The last remnant of Cheryl's pills was a swamp of conflicting thoughts. "Reese?" he said again. "What day is this?" She asked. "What, it's Monday." He said. "What's going on, what's wrong?" "It's Tuesday." She said. "No, it's..." Ray began, but then he stopped. There was silence on both ends of the phone for a moment. Then Ray said, "Did you hear what she asked?" Then she heard it, and a sick feeling of déjà vu swept through her. There was a loud report, a distant bang coming over the phone. "What was that?" Ray said. And from the sound of his voice he was walking. "Ray, wait." Teresa said there was another loud report, still distant but closer, and Teresa heard a woman scream. "I'm going to find out what's going on." Ray said, "I'll call you back." "Don't," Teresa said, but he was gone. Teresa put her phone down on the bathroom sink and stared down at it, her hair cascading in front of her eyes. She shook her head violently, trying to shake off the confusion that made it difficult for her to focus. She ran her fingers through her hair, and then pulled her in frustration. She picked her phone back up and called a cell voicemail. She called his desk phone voicemail. She called reception at his office. The outgoing message informed her that in light of yesterday's tragic events, the office would be closed for the remainder of the week. Teresa furrowed her brow and put the phone down on the sink again. Seconds later it rang again. The screen said Ray. She answered it without saying anything. "Reese," Ray said, his voice whispering panic, "listen to me. There's a man with a gun. Subscribe and never miss out on our fantastic videos."